Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Apex AMA. My name is Lawton Ho here with Verified Investing, and I go live every single day that the markets are open from 12:30 to 1:15 to answer all of your questions. I hope you guys have had an amazing day so far and hopefully had a good day yesterday. The way this works is you can go ahead and visit the homepage of our verifiedinvesting.com or scan that QR code to ask your question. But basically, you ask questions, I do my best to answer them. So how's everybody doing today? Let me pull up my charts as well. Okay. Let's start by looking at the S&P while you guys get your questions. And taking a look at the S&P, having a bit of a down day now. Right, we're slightly up, but from where we started, and it looked like we were going to be pretty decently green, about $2 green. We've pulled back slightly, right? We're still close to flat, maybe $1 higher, but don't expect this to last. If you take a look at the SMH, the semiconductor ETF, this could mark the top. There's been a beautiful pullback on the semis from this morning's highs, right? Opened up higher, went up about 1.5% on the SMH, pulled back decently to negative, and is now bounced back and has gone back to positive. But let's get into some of your questions, okay? First of all, Ivo says, hi, Lawton. What's up, Ivo? Why are some smart money stocks ETFs open? Where's our process here? Those are if there are trades on our track record, right, in our open positions from whatever service, that means our traders are still in them. I couldn't answer specifics about any of our services because I'm not the trader that gave that trade. But if it's one of my trades, I can speak to it. Dean says, Baidu sunk to mid 88.50 area today. Have a long position, 89.59, 90.50. Would you wait and hold through the downturn or take a third position because it's looking good or exit? All right, so let's take a look at Baidu. So Baidu having a rough day. And here's the thing, right? China stocks have been on a pretty decent run as of late, right? With Baidu going up about 7% from its lows about a week ago. So Baidu and the rest of the China stocks have gone up decently. If you say your average is at 89.50-ish, you're out of the money about 1%. That's nothing to worry about, right? I wouldn't say that's cause for major concern. It's only 1% at the end of the day. And if you take a look at the chart, Baidu is trading so far down from its highs. For me, you have a couple things to watch when you're trading this. You have a couple trend lines that you want to be cognizant of when trading stocks like Baidu. Like this one, if we can break above this trend line, wherever we break out of it, I can anticipate a move up at least 10 to 15% higher, right? So it's gone up, so it does have potential to go higher. Here's something I'll say. When we get into trades, when we're in trades, whether it's a swing trade or day trade, we kind of get emotional, right? We're like, oh my God, it's slightly against me. I'm out of the money 1%, 2%. Like, what should I do? Like, in reality, in the grand scheme of things, would you take profits at 1%? Would you take profits at 2%? In general, for swing trades, we're looking for at least 10% or more. So I wouldn't think about adding to the position or being worried about the position if it's still within 10% of your break even. So for me, I'll give you a level of support. It's only 2% lower, right? This is a gap fill here, additional gap fill here, pivot low here. Out of all these levels, if I was going to trade Baidu, I might consider trading it around here on this $84.24 level. That should provide a decent bounce. But really, excuse me, this $81.18 level is the main level that I'd likely want to target. Oscar says, but you and Drew talked about Soundhound yesterday. Sure. Soundhound yesterday. I'm caught in 718 $10 calls. You sold. Financial advice aside, how would you play this? I'm looking for a small premium. Was that a smart move? Here's the thing. Are you talking about calls or puts? The thing is, right? And in my experience with options, I'm only buying calls, putting out calls or puts. That's it. So very, very basic, right? Like I think the stock is going to go here by this time, so I'm going to whatever. But for me, I can just tell you on Soundhound where I expect this to go. So it's had a beautiful reversal, right? This was, again, the line in the sand, this pivot low. It's where we kind of pulled back from yesterday. Keep yawning, sorry guys. And today we kind of kissed that and then pulled back. I'll give you my levels for support on Soundhound. I'm really not interested in any support until here. So I believe Soundhound could go down to $11.37 before getting a bounce. As far as resistance is concerned, I talked about this yesterday as well. Pivot low right here should provide resistance, and additionally up here around $15.24. There's a beautiful gap fill that you can consider additional resistance. Renica says, good morning, Lawton. Good. What's up, Renica? Delta earnings coming out tomorrow, and I'm bullish. Okay. And I'm bullish. Delete this. And I'm bullish. What is the potential upside price? Should I get out after earnings? Thank you. Okay, this is a great question and a great opportunity for a teachable moment. Okay, here's today's teachable moment, okay? You say you're bullish into Delta, into earnings tomorrow. Where should I get out? What's the upside? Here's what I would recommend. I am not comfortable, and any of these other traders will tell you they are not comfortable going long or short into earnings. Right? We don't do that. And I'll tell you why. Right? Earnings are so volatile. Even if a chart favors move to the upside or downside, you could just as easily get blown up, right? Absolutely get blown up if the earnings go the other way. What if Delta says that they are expecting a decrease in revenue, right? They have poor guidance, right? Then the stock could fall, let's see how much it moves. Like the stock could fall like 20%, right? Even if the chart setup looks good. So I never go long or short into earnings. Here's what I do for earnings. And this is part of the teachable moment. So when I want to find levels for earnings, I first look at the previous earnings, right? And see how price action moved. What is the expected volatility for earnings? So we see on here, this previous earnings, about a 5 to 6% move on Delta. For here on Delta, it was a 3% move and then a continued move higher. Let's check over here. About 1%. So this stock doesn't necessarily move the most. And finally, I'm looking here. about 8%, right? So we know that the expected volatility will be somewhere around 5 to 7%, right? That's kind of where I'm expecting Delta to move. So I'm going to look for levels in that range to the downside and the upside. So let's look for support and resistance levels around that 5 to 8%, right? First off, you have a pivot low down here around 45.35. That's really the only clear level, unless you'd like to start a position here at this previous gap fill that proved to be support around $47. Right, that's about 7% lower. An additional support down here, $45.35 for additional support down there. So those are two places that Delta could see a bounce. Right. So if earnings are poor, if earnings are absolutely atrocious, my max downside, and it's always important to have max downside. My max downside target for Delta could be this gap fill down here. This is worst case scenario on Delta. Right. You also have gap window here. As far as resistance, right? You say you're bullish on Delta into earnings. Let's look for levels of resistance within that range that I previously mentioned. First of all, you have this beautiful pivot high, right? This was the high prior to the dividend payout. And that's around $53.55. Additionally, if you want to look 10% higher, you have a gap fill over here at around $54.92. The last level of resistance I have on Delta that's obvious to me is around $58.41. If you are currently long, and despite what I told you, you still plan to go long Delta into earnings, these would be my upside targets. The way I would play this is put out orders to, if it hits here, I might institute a short because I expect a pullback, right, due to that increased bounce and volatility and action. Next question. Luis says, I'm short Carvana. Resistance is at 360. What is resistance on the downside? You mean support? You're short Carvana. Where's support? Support I have here around 9% lower, around $319.40. I could realistically see Carvana getting a bounce there. There's also a gap fill over here at around 259.07. You also have this beautiful pivot low that you could use for support for an intermediary. But these are levels that I expect Carvana to bounce should it pull back. Now, does the chart favor a pullback? 100% absolutely. If you look at this chart, look how overextended it is. The only thing is it does have higher to go. Carvana still has yet to make new all-time highs like they did back on the 2021. Back in 2021. You have all these pivots that you could consider resistance as well for Carvana. Faisal says, hi, what's up? Can you analyze THD natural gas? Thanks. I'm trying to look for what you're talking about. Let's just look at natural gas. So natural gas is looking like it's going to fall. Now, there is an amazing pattern on my chart. So let me know if you guys can identify it, right? Can you properly identify the pattern that's on the chart? Painfully obvious? I'll give you a moment. All right, now that you've had some time to put in your guesses, look at this beautiful head and shoulders pattern. This is the wrong one. Oops. Head and shoulders pattern. Left shoulder, head. It's like this. Almost perfect head and shoulders pattern that has yet to break on natural gas. And if we take the measured move by taking the distance between the head and the neckline to kind of get an estimate of where it could go, you have something like this. Now, do I expect natural gas to fall 64%? No, I don't. Right? Measured moves rarely play out to the full measured move, right? You sometimes get around 40 to 50% of the way. But regardless, this is still bearish on natural gas. So I believe that if we can break from this, you're expecting more downside. Now, the way to enter this trade and a break of any trend line, really, and I say this every single AMA, you can either enter on a break or you can look for a retrace down to the neckline and order somewhere around here. Enter somewhere around here. Okay. Hope that makes sense, Faisal. Alice says, can you talk about HIMS? What about HIMS? HIMS is kind of like a... What do you want to know about HIMS? These are my levels of support and resistance on HIMS. My support levels for 48.46, 45.03. This level was actually hit yesterday, and we saw a nice bounce off of that. So these are my levels of support: 45.03, 40.89. As far as resistance, you have tons of resistance levels. 64.27 is a gap fill. There's a previous gap fill of 66.40, 67.33 is pivot high. Additional gap fill at 68.81, and then you have double top here at $72.86. So these are the levels that I expect HIMS to potentially bounce or pull back from. Just know that some of these levels are day trading levels, and some of them would be longer term swing trade levels, right? Mark says, do you think Ethereum will keep going up in the short term and also long? Well, I'm long-term bullish on Ethereum. I definitely can see Ethereum going back to $3,000 this year, this calendar year. But as far as the chart is concerned, I mean, you have kind of like an inverse head and shoulders pattern, right? If you want to say this is a shoulder, this is a head, and today would be the breakout, right? Let's find a measured move. So because of this breakout of this inverse head and shoulders pattern, which is valid due to the downsloping trend line, the measured move is 21% higher. I think this thing could easily go back to $3,000. So I'm bullish in the long term and in the short term, I guess. I think I feel the same way about Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is bullish in the long term as well. Let's see here. Doom Capital says, please look at Plug. Sure, let's take a look at Plug. Plug has had an amazing day. Okay, so massive thing. Plug signed a multi-year deal with the U.S. industrial gas firm. Yep, so that means that this company, and here's the thing about small cap companies, it takes a little bit of small news and it can absolutely ignite the price of any of these small caps and make them shoot exponentially higher. So hence the 27% move off of extremely bullish news. Now the question is, how high can it go? Where do I expect a pullback? My first level I'd really be interested is around 208, right? That's the first level I'd be semi-interested in a trade on this. You can see that plug power is way down from its highs, so it is definitely at the lows of the chart. That's why for me it needs to go about 15% higher before I even look at the stock, right? Before I even look at it for a short, right? All right. Brian says, can you look at GEV and give your opinion? Sure. Yeah, so GE Verona, this is a company after the split, has gone straight up basically for the past, past just over a year, right? So this stock is at all-time highs. It's hard to find, and I say this every single time, it is so difficult to find resistance levels on a stock that's at all-time highs. Do I believe that GEV is overextended? Yes. Do I believe that GEV favors a pullback? Absolutely, 100%. But it's hard for me to tell you exactly where, right? Because looking at this after this fall, you might have thought, wow, this is great, right? GEV is going to start pulling back because look at this vertical move. It's up 275% since the split. So I could say, oh, it's going to keep going lower and lower and lower, which it did. Right now, this gap fill was resistance. But what did it do? It kind of crushed that. On the way up, it crushed this level of resistance like it was nothing, right? Crushed it and continued going higher. It kind of pulled back, almost retraced to it. But yeah, so the best I can do, right, is try, and especially on a stock with not that much data, is find some levels of resistance, right? And it's actually into a level of resistance right now. Take this pivot high, lead it through this pivot high, and that gives you basically today's price right now. So if GEV closes right here and struggles to maintain a price action above this trend line, that could be a extremely bearish signal potentially signaling the top for GEV. Now I understand it's really hard, right? Especially on a stock with not a chart with not as much data, so I don't have terribly too much on this, unfortunately. I mean, there's always other trend lines, right? You can always pull, and that's the great thing about trend lines. You can continue to draw them through this pivot and ran into resistance again today. However you draw them, you're running into resistance. But even if you want to do this one, and I wouldn't use this just because this was like after the split, there's like 3 days after, right? It's not a great trend line, but that would put resistance up here. And I doubt it gets here at around close to $600. Brent says, general question. Between all the traders and services like yourself, how much is the group aware of the trades your colleagues are taking in other services? Do you guys discuss them, or is it each individual making their own individual calls? So yeah, in general, we will we'll talk and share ideas, absolutely, but I'm not looking to see what the other traders are necessarily putting out in their swing trade services, so on and so forth. I think, we kind of trade individually like that. But we definitely talk to each other about our ideas. As always, guys, feel free to ask questions. If you want to ask questions, you can scan the QR code down below or visit the verifiedinvesting.com homepage and submit your questions for me. Thanks again for asking all these questions, guys. Glenn says, good morning, Lawton. What's up, Glenn? What's your take on Weeride? Thank you. Let's take a look on WRD Weeride. So Weeride, I had previously mentioned levels of support and resistance, as you can see from my chart. Having a pretty good day. Again, small company, right? And when there's positive news, this thing rips. Look at this. Positive news absolutely rips. Why did it rip here? I think NVIDIA disclosed an investment into the stock, then it continued to fall. So anyways, where do I think it'll likely find resistance? Pivot high. Here. Here. So moving forward on Weeride, and let me delete some of these. These are the levels that I think Weeride could see a pullback. About 9% higher, about 935. Again, around 11 or 12% higher at 975. And finally, around 20.5% higher at $10.45. These are the levels that I expect Weeride to pull back. Definitely favors a move to the upside, particularly if they have any good news. This is similar to Plug, right? It was down in the pisser at the very low lows of the chart. Had some great news, and boom, look at this, 25. It was 27%, but look at the explosion to the upside. Belky says analysis of BitX. This is just Bitcoin, right? That's an ETF of Bitcoin. So I already talked about actually, I don't think I have. For Bitcoin, looks kind of bullish, potentially bull flagging here. Could look for a level of resistance is obviously the previous all-time high. But I have a trend line putting this pivot through this pivot, which would put, potential move up to $115,000 on Bitcoin. Gene saying, what does Michael Saylor's MSTR do? They don't do much except for buy Bitcoin. I know they're like a regular company. I think they sell some sort of software, right? But in general, the stock is going to move similar to Bitcoin. If you take a look at this chart, MSTR, and look at, they look almost identical. So all you need to know on MSTR in general is if Bitcoin goes up, MSTR is going to go up. If Bitcoin drops, MSTR is also going to fall in general. Christina says, what altcoins are you bullish on the short, mid, and long term? That's kind of a general question and not one that I really would like to answer. I can tell you a couple that I like. TAO, I'm kind of bullish on. It's kind of consolidating down here, kind of like a wedge. It's like a wedge pattern potentially. I'm looking for a breakout, favoring a move to the upside. I think I'm bullish on TAO. Good day, Lon. Just your opinion on copper tariff announcement on a copper short. Yeah, I saw the tariff news popped up, right? Copper is up significantly. This is something that doesn't move a whole lot, right? And the time to make a move was yesterday to consider a short. But yeah, people get really excited because of the news. But you also have to remember, particularly on tariffs, right? Our president has a history of announcing tariffs and then reversing them. That's not a political statement, right? That's just something that happened previously. Right? Did that on Liberation Day, giving countries more time to figure out what they wanted to do, etc. So you saw I just drew that trend line. This is the trend line where I think there's going to be some resistance on copper. Could it keep going higher? Yes, it could. See how I can find any additional trend lines. Let's see. This one looks good. And look at that. So for me on copper, this would be my max upside, right? If you didn't get in already, you could wait potentially 9% higher at around $6 to initiate a short. You saw how I drew that trend line on the weekly time frame all the way back from May or June of 2006. Vertico says, what's the potential upside for Oxy? Sure, let's take a look. So for Oxy, potential upside, full disclosure, this is not a stock I've traded before, but the stock is at the lows, is not at the lows, but is lower on the chart about 60% from its all-time highs back from February of 2014 dollars. For me, Oxy, depending on how it consolidates here, this could be bullish. Right? If Oxy just continues to put some sideways candles, particularly if they are down sloping, right, it's actually pretty bullish, right? So for Oxy, if it did that, your first level of resistance for me would be this pivot high over here. Of course, you can see that from June, right? Then you have this gap fill prior to this really big fall from April. These are the Liberation Day, pre-Liberation Day level gap fill that should provide some resistance, on Oxy. So for me, if I'm trading this, my upside targets would be 4.5 and then around 8.5% higher from its current trading level. MD says, hey Lon, good day. Just want to thank you for your nice chart analysis. Thank you so much for your kind words, MD, and thank you guys all for joining me. Right, and I know that there's a lot of questions here, guys, and I'm going to do my best to answer them all as we have around 10 minutes left. But if you see that if you have more questions for me and I'm not currently live, you can always send them to me on Twitter. Send me a DM. At Lawton Investing is my Twitter handle. That's at Lawton Investing. Christina says, can you give your analysis on Circle and whether you'd swing long at any level? Absolutely. So Circle, this is not something I would swing long. This is not something I would touch. It IPO'd in June. I don't have much levels. I think this is going down below $60. In fact, I have a short on Circle that I've been holding, and this was my entry at around $280.03, and I still haven't sold. It went down. I was almost 40% in the money, over $100 per share in the money, which sounds insane for me not to sell. I sold some of it. I think I had decent. I sold 4/5 of my shares. I'm still holding on to the last 1/5. Really, I think it's going sub 60, but yeah, I'm not going to touch this for a long. If you wanted to force a trade, there's a gap fill right here, 133.64. You could target, but nah, I'm not interested in going long Circle. Sorry about that. I accidentally took myself off this. I clicked the back button on my mouse and it kicked me out. So sorry about that. All right, guys. Next question. And again, I have 10 minutes left. So make sure to get your questions in by scanning the QR code or visiting the verifiedinvesting.com homepage to submit a question. Brandon says, hi, Lawton. I'm down 95%. I QID $29 calls. Should I roll them to next month and taking the full loss? The position hasn't played out and expire soon. QID. Calls, I mean, you could, right, roll them into next month. I mean, that's a really big loss, though. You're talking about a put, probably, right? Or call. $29 call. Oh, up here. Yeah, to be honest, let's see this. I see it. 15%. So you're expecting, and this is leveraged how many times? is 2 times leverage. So you'd need the Qs to come in about 7% to get to your break even. I mean, I could definitely see it happening. Absolutely. It's a matter of the question is when, right? Is as to when, right? Do I think it's going to pull back? Yes. Do I think it's going to pull back by July 18th? 8%, 7%? It could, but I think it's unlikely, considering I see support on QID over here around 531, right? Or Qs at 531, right? Which isn't enough to get you all the way there to your strike price. So I'd roll them forward if you could. Peter says, until when do you think the correction of ASTS will run? I mean, that's a good question. I'm not a genie. I can only tell you where I see levels of support and resistance. So my first level of support is down here around $40. And an additional level of support over here at $38.45. They do have earnings in 40 days, but you have to remember that this has been an incredible run for ASTS, right? AST SpaceMobile, about 140% to the upside, right? So you're going to expect a pullback, right? So realistically, $40, $38.45, you could easily get a bounce there. Okay. As time is starting to wind down, have about 8 minutes left, but in 3 minutes at 10:10, I'm going to go into a rapid fire round where you guys are able to submit your questions, your stock tickers, and I'm going to try to answer them as quickly as possible. So if you want to participate and have some sort of stock on your mind that you'd like me to take a look at, that you'd want me to analyze, leave them down below and I'll take care of it in my rapid fire round. That starts in 3 minutes. And you can submit your question or your ticker that you want me to take a look at exclusively on the verifiedinvesting.com homepage. I'm going to give myself like 30 seconds to drink some water. But after that, we'll get into this rapid fire round. Before we go in that, let's take a look at the S&P. See if there's any big moves. And we had this kind of nice sell-off, right? And it's kind of chopped sideways today. Did submit a day trade earlier today. I'll show you what I day traded today. I day traded this SOXS. My first entry was 724. I had an ad level here at 714, but it didn't fill me, unfortunately, but nailed it to the penny, right? The low to the penny. And I'd like to say that I held this all the way up here for a 30-cent gain, but I didn't. I took like 10 cents on this thing. 10-cent gain on SOX. So not bad. Took about $1,000-something on this trade. And I know that Gareth in today's live day trading room, he shorted NVIDIA somewhere here around up here, so 164. And again, would love to say he took this all the way down here, but he took about $1.50, basically just under 163. So not too bad in today's live day trading room. All right, guys, it's time for the rapid fire round. Now, the way this works is I'm going to go through your questions as quickly as I can. and we'll see if we can get them through, since this is the last 5 minutes of the Apex AMA. Again, guys, if you have more questions and I'm not currently live, you can always send them to me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @LawtonInvesting. All right, let's get into this. All right, Vincent says, hope you are well. You too, Vincent. What do you think about NVAX? Let's take a look at NVAX. So Novavax, I have resistance level right here around 725. It kind of kissed that. It's down big, right? Down a lot off of its highs, right? Talking about almost 98, 99%. See if there's any news. I know that there are some pharmaceutical tariffs that were kind of announced. But for a company, again, look at this, guys. Novavax, small cap company, right? What does that mean? More volatile. So what do I expect from Novavax? Or where do I expect a pullback or a bounce? My first level of support for Novavax, it's right here around 613. You have a huge level. This is the Liberation Day lows around 501. I don't expect it to come back here. But you have to remember, with companies like this, health technology, pharmaceutical, biotech companies, if there's any little bit of good news, like there was here, could pop 50%, like no problem. My level of resistance, potentially 878. That's the first level that I'd realistically target a short. On things so far down on the charts, especially so volatile, I'm not too interested in entering a short. However, you do have this upsloping trend line that could be super bearish if this trend line were to break. All right, next question. Mobileye. I spent too much time on that question. I'm going to go a little faster, guys. Mobileye is down on bad news. I'm only down 2%. Do I add? Hisa says. I mean, it's not that bad, right? I think that you could add to your position over here around 1642. There's a gap fill there. That should provide support. Overall, this chart doesn't look too bad, too bearish for me. She says, I entered SRPT before the big pullback. Do you see it going back to the $40 level anytime soon? Ooh, that's tough. For me on SRPT, Serapita Technologies, this was my level of support, 1694. This was my level to go long. Unfortunately, you're going to have a lot of levels of resistance before that. So do I think SRPT is going to go back to $40 anytime soon? You have that level, this level. You have tons of levels of resistance. To be honest, could it go back up there? If there's really good news, yes. But if I'm not mistaken, somebody died in one of their pharmaceutical trials or something. So to be honest, unless they come out with something groundbreaking, my answer would be no. But again, for these small cap companies, a little bit of news can make them skyrocket or absolutely tank. All right, next question. Martin says, coin, daily bull flag. Yes, absolutely. I think it is bull flagging. Would not surprise me if this went up significantly. And look at how beautiful this is as well. A little bit different of a inverse head and shoulders pattern, but still valid. I mean, look at that beautiful inverse head and shoulders pattern. And let's see the measured move. The measured move of this, and I don't expect it to go up there, but is up 54%. Now it's gone over half of that, right? And if you saw this inverse head and shoulders, you could have entered a long. But yeah, I do see that bull flag. The only thing you have to note is this is a bull flag towards the highs of the chart. You're going to find resistance at this previous pivot high and on the IPO high up here around 428. So yes, it's putting in a bull flag, but you're going to find levels of resistance there. Okay, last question. RCL seems to have stalled. At 330, do you envision a downturn? Where are the short levels at RCL? I mean, you could say it's stalling, or you could say it's bull flagging. If you wanted to short it, you could short it now. What I would do though is I would put a stop loss for me. I wouldn't lose more than 3 or 4% on this. So you enter here RCL right now at 332. My stop loss would be around 4% higher at 344.70 with a downside target of, my target for a short in RCL would probably be here, 17.5% to the downside. That way you have a nice risk to reward ratio of basically 4-to-1. Okay. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me. My name again is Lawton Ho here with Verified Investing, and I go live every single day. The markets are open from 12:30 to 1:15. If you have more questions for me, just send them to me on Twitter at Lawton Investing. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Best of luck in the markets, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Take it easy, guys. Bye-bye.